Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday Night Bible Study hosted by the Dallin Road Church of Christ. I'm so happy to have my brother Harold Whitfield, one of our deacons here at the Dallin Road Church of Christ. So glad to have you with me tonight.
Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Just love Harold to death, and just was so thankful, Harold, to have Jackson this past summer in the summer intern. He did just a wonderful job, and just thankful for him and your family as a whole.
Well, I want to thank you and then the Down Road congregation of the elders for giving that opportunity. I mean, it was
Absolutely.
once in a lifetime opportunity, perhaps. I mean, we don't know what he's going to do with that opportunity, but
Sure.
But it was great exposure for him.
Yeah. All right.
And an opportunity for him to actually get out of his shell.
Well, and as you're talking about tonight, the topic for tonight that Harold's going to lead us in is stepping out of our comfort zone. So why don't you just give us a little quick preview, and then we'll get into our main points.
Okay, so my hope is, we'll start with the parable of the talents, and then we'll look at a few other examples, and we'll make an application along the way. That's the layout of the study.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Okay, so like Aaron mentioned a few minutes ago, we're going to talk about stepping out of our comfort zone. And, you might ask, well, what do you mean by comfort zone? And, so I'm in here with a jacket, and it's kind of cool, but I feel very comfortable. I mean, we all have our preferred settings on the air conditioners, but that's not a type of comfort zone I'm talking about this evening. So when we talk about stepping out of our comfort zone, I'm talking about a social comfort zone. Right, and so and we all have them, whether we want to admit it or not. And we talk about who we like to hang out with, what places we like to visit, what interests we have. We all have our preferences and comfort zones, and these comfort zones, they can be based on things such as occupation, education, income, hobbies, interests, and even race. That's the most obvious one. And there's nothing wrong with having comfort zones in and of themselves, but if we're not careful, those boundaries can limit our growth in the kingdom. Right. So that's what I want to talk about this evening. So we're going to start with the parable of the talents, and we're starting off in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30, and it's a pretty lengthy read, but I'll go ahead and read it. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. And likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received the 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you rule over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He who also had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you rule over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So I had some follow-up questions One of the questions I ask is, we know what a talent. A talent is a weight of gold, a value of money. I'm not sure the exact amount, but it's a large sum. There are different things you'll find on the internet about the actual what a talent is. But in this case, we see that it is a parable, and the parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And the first thing I ask is, where did the talents come from? Jessica, a question for you. What do you think?
Yeah, well, he just said that he gave it to them, right? So he entrusted them to them. He gave them the talents.
Right.
Verse 15.
Yes, verse 15. Yes. So, and he gave them to them. And the follow-up question, too, then, is how were they allocated, though?
There you go. So it says, I think, according to his ability.
Right.
Yeah, verse 15. Yeah.
According to his own ability. And I think that's how, we have how the association became, we look at talent with one's own ability. It's a weight of gold, but it's one's own ability. And so when we think about, a barrier, and we think about, so just to summarize the parable again, okay, so one servant had 5, he got 5 more. Another one had 2, he got 2 more. And then the one who had 1 took it and hid it. Okay, so now, what do you think prevented the one talent man from using his talent?
As you were reading, I just thought about it. When he says, "I knew," of course, he says, "I knew you were this kind of person, and I was afraid." So you reap where you don't sow. When I was afraid, and so I hid it.
Right. So yeah. So one of the things we can gather, just from that is that it was presumptuous, being presumptuous.
Yeah. Good.
A lot of times, when we are when we're faced with a challenge or an opportunity, to step out of our comfort zone, we often tell ourselves a story, and that story can be either good or bad.
Yeah.
And in this case, we see the outcome of that. And so, but another thing too that we just read too is that another obstacle is, besides the story we tell ourselves, is the fear that that we have, based on that story, because that story then influences some type of emotional response, and then we react on that, and it may not even be valid,
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking about this. When the master says, "Well, you knew that I was that way," so maybe some of his narrative was even true about this guy. I don't know, but he says, "Well, you knew that, so why didn't you do something?" But yeah, we can tell ourselves a narrative. Man, I think about how many times I've told a story in my head and then realized, wow, I was way off. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I have a follow-up question: is how were the men able to multiply their talents? What do you think about that one?
Well, in verse 16, it says that, the one with the 5 I'm talking about, he traded. So he went and invested, in a sense, and did something with it to gain back 5 more.
Right. Well, so, if we want to do a little math here, how much interest is that?
100%, right?
100%.
Yeah,
That's
it's a pretty good return.
Yes, it is. It is. So, that is true. So, he went and invested it, but the thing is, the answer I'm looking for is that he took what he gave them and he used what he had. And implicitly they stepped outside of their comfort zone to do it, because it involved the risk. That's what stepping outside of a comfort zone involves some type of risk.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so, sometimes I like to do a little introspection about my zones of comfort. I would describe myself as an introverted person, and then when you look up literature about being an introvert, they say people who are introverted, they're really selectively introverted. So it depends on the type of social situation that you're in that's going to bring out that the other side of a person, right?
Yeah.
So my question I have is like, what are your zones of comfort? So you might find, like in a social gathering, I'm more likely to be pretty much like off to myself, and in important situations I prefer activities that are structured. you know, structured. Like I'm not, you know, you might, you know, my wife may be something like on the other hand, may be a little different than that. You know, going up to someone, starting a conversation. I mean, you know, that's not, you know, not always easy for me, but you know, but I do things to step outside of that, you know, to have something, you know, structured to present. You know, in other words, like if I'm also a chamber ambassador, so if I go to a ribbon cutting or something like that, you know, then I have things I may ask. So how are you connected to this event? You know, that kind of thing. You know, just things to start, you know, the conversation. But you know, to me, you seem like an outgoing person. You know, you're an outgoing person. I would consider you an extrovert. And so, what are your zones of comfort?
That's a good question. I was thinking about that because it's funny when I think about Anna and I. You know, Anna's again maybe selectively introverted. When you think about, there's certain areas where she's more introverted than others. But I can go into a room of 300 people and just go around the room. I might have a lot of conversations, but she might have one really long conversation with somebody, right? That might be more uncomfortable for me than it is for her. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So there are ways where she functions differently and better than I do. Now, yeah. So as far as the idea of comfort, for me, I again being that outgoing, happy personality, conflict, I want to run from it. Right. And so I've had to, I mean, I'm in the wrong job, right, for that. but again, so I've had to learn, hey, you know, there's times there's going to be that. And so that's very uncomfortable, but you can't just always have happy conversations. And so there are times I have to have very uncomfortable conversations, and that is uncomfortable. I mean, that's just out of my comfort zone.
Yeah. And I get what you're saying, you know, about your wife, because I mean, you know, I prefer to have like meaningful one-on-one conversations too than this you know, small talk.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But it takes everybody like that, right? Because that's important to have different. I mean, it would just be, if everybody was like me, that would not be a good world. So, but we'd have a lot of ideas, but not much would get done. I'm just being silly, but no, it is that's what we have to be able to embrace that. But I think, to your point, real quick, I'll just say this real quickly because I know you got to move on. Sometimes extroverts, it's easier to judge the introverts saying, you guys got to get out of your comfort zones. But that's the question for others as well. Is like, we all have them. We all have places that we're comfortable, and all of us have to look at and say, okay, where's mine? So I appreciate that point. That is so good.
So, obviously, you know, when we looked at here, and then, you know, in this parable, there was a penalty imposed for the talent man who hid his talent, and it just shows the seriousness, you know, of not using the abilities that God gave us for, you know, for the furtherance of the kingdom, right? So what was that penalty?
Yeah, I mean, he calls them wicked and slothful,
right?
In verse 20. Is it 26? My eyes are doing. And then he says, take from him that one talent and give it to the 10-talent man, in verse 28.
And then in verse 30, it says, cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing.
So he's separated from the master.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that gnashing of teeth, there people do it in anger, you know, but they also do it in anguish too. You know, that's what we see here. Judgment language. So one of the things I want to mention too is that, you know, why is it important to step outside of our comfort zone, and we saw one example of that. But in Ephesians chapter 4 verses 11 through 13. The Apostle Paul says, and he himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints, for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. So there in Ephesians, we see that all of us have some type of role to play in the Lord's church, and one of the benefits of us stepping outside of our comfort zone and use them in the service of the kingdom is that whole idea of edifying or building up one another in the Lord's kingdom.
Yeah, and yeah, just it's you think about it, he describes it later as a body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that we're and I like it, verse 16. It's like with every joint with which it's equipped.
Mm-hmm.
God made a body, a physical body is same thing, right? We're very different parts, different functions, different things together. It's a unit and it works together. So, yeah. So in order for me to help the body function properly, then that means I have to utilize my potential. Yeah, it's a good point.
Right, and often we don't know, what our potential is.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we don't until we start, using it, putting ourselves in situations that may not be comfortable, and then soon what happens is then our zone of comfort gets wider.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how we grow.
Yeah, I was going to the gym with Tony, and I'm still working out, but we're not going together now. But he was helping me, and we working out, and I'd get a little whiny, and he's like, "Aaron, we're not here to be comfortable." I'm like, I preached to other people that, and now I'm getting it preached back at me. But we're not here on this earth to be comfortable. I mean,
so. I've been a manager for the past 11 years on my job, and I've been to several leadership trainings, and one of the things that they say in leadership training is that growth happens when you step outside of your comfort zone, and that's true in just about all aspects of life, especially in our spiritual realm as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as we look throughout the Bible, there are numerous examples of individuals who step outside of their comfort zones to do great things for the cause of God. And so, if we want to continue to look at some examples, we can look at Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. And it says, "Now the Lord had said to Abram, 'Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you.'" So basically, God tells Abraham, to go from your country, to your people, to your father's house, and from your father's household. And this was no small ask for Abraham. Mm-hmm. He was called to leave behind everything familiar, his homeland, his family, and his security, to venture into the unknown. But his faith and obedience in stepping out of the comfort zone led to a profound blessing, becoming the father of many nations. And one of the things that I take away from that too is sometimes when we happen to want to maybe take a job from some place, we need to establish that a place to worship.
Right.
One of the things that has kept my family here, my wife, is that we have a deep sense of connection with the local brethren here. Mm-hmm. And so, I know my wife, when she was working for DuPont, several years ago, she came from South Carolina to be a chemical engineer. And then, that's kind of panned out. And so so she had an opportunity, a choice to either go to Delaware or go to the port. And we decided we're going to stay here. And so that meant taking a lower paying job. So she went into education. But even if you go on vacation, wherever vacations, and when you relocate, you need to find a faithful congregation. Mm-hmm. But like Abraham, stepping out of our comfort zones often involves leaving behind what we know, and it requires faith in God's plan and trust that He will guide us. And then there's a rhetorical question here that says, "Are there areas in your life where you feel like that you've been called to step out of your faith?" And maybe it's like a challenging relationship or a personal goal, and we should just embrace the journey and confidence, knowing that God's plans are always good. So, if that job where maybe you're paying a lot of money, if there's no faithful place to worship, there are two ways of looking at you. Maybe you will have a starter congregation, or maybe we can reevaluate whether or not it's really something you ought to take.
Yeah, and just thinking about that in contrast to Lot, you have Lot when they're together with, in Genesis 13, they separate. Lot chooses the well-watered plain. He chooses money. He chooses material things, but he pitches his tent towards Sodom, a very wicked place. But you can see Abraham he's always building an altar to God. So wherever he is, he's worshiping God, and he's God-focused. And so, yeah, that's an important point. And that would make you uncomfortable. Again, losing income is uncomfortable, but like, hey, we're going to choose to be with a congregation where we know we're solid and have, our family's going to be secure spiritually and be taught spiritually. That's a sacrifice. That is uncomfortable, but God bless you for doing that. That's a great example.
Yeah, so there's another example, a second example, and it's in David and Goliath in 1 Samuel 17.
As you turn there, just again, I just realized I was returning to 1 Samuel 17, just thinking about, man, what that would be like to leave your home and family, everything you knew, travel hundreds and hundreds of miles, and not really know. What is this going to look like, be like? I mean, everything, like you said, you listed, I think, your home, your security, your family, everything. Leave your father's house. So everything you know is back here, and you're going to travel to this completely strange place. That had to bring some fear with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think that's an amazing thought. We need to remember.
Yeah. So one of the things here it says, that when he left, it would have been like, leaving behind a critical social support system. Yet, in spite of that, he stepped outside of his comfort zone to be obedient to God.
I'm reminded of Joshua 24, and we won't go there, but I just when Joshua was about to die, and he's talking to the people about to go into the land of Israel or land of Canaan, and he was talking about Abraham, and he says Abraham's family were idolaters. And there's another layer of that. He was leaving behind the security and safety and comfort, but his family was entrenched in idolatry, and God says, I want to remove you from that. And so I just think that's interesting, concept, but
yeah,
definitely uncomfortable.
So another example is the example of David and Goliath, and we see that in 1 Samuel 17. So we encounter the young shepherd David, who steps up and faces the giant Goliath. And David, his willingness to confront Goliath, despite being inexperienced and underestimated, he demonstrates immense courage and trust in God. So he was stepping outside of his comfort zone, leaving behind his role as a shepherd to become a warrior.
Yeah, and he's just a young man. How old he is, we don't know, right? But mercy, he's young, and I'd say that'd be pretty uncomfortable to see Goliath coming at me. This. Not only a hardened, seasoned warrior, but a very large one that everyone else in Israel is running away from. That would be very uncomfortable, but he stood.
Yeah, and so his examples, it teaches us that that stepping outside of our comfort zone involves facing our own giants, challenges that seem insurmountable. And it's about confronting our fears and trusting in God that equips us with what we need to overcome them. I guess we can think about some of the giants that we have to face in our everyday life. But what is God calling us? What is God calling us to face with courage and faith?
Yeah. So what are some of those giants? I think you're talking about. I was thinking about this in one of the other points, but maybe it's a marriage that's struggling. And you got to get out of your comfort zone, because maybe the comfort is the way we're not happy, but we're comfortable. Your people are used to doing that way in their marriage, but in order to grow in their marriage or in our marriages, we've got to change sometimes how we do things, which makes us uncomfortable. It's a whole new way of thinking or doing things, and maybe a spouse, just the way he or she says things, is just very rough and hurtful, but then we realize, oh wow, I need to stop doing that because this is what happens. Or maybe we're not showing enough grace in our marriage or whatever it is. So those kind of things definitely can cause us to step out of our comfort zone, being more evangelistic, right? Just being able to take that card at HEB or at the gas station and push past the fear for just a moment, right? And say, hey, I'd love to invite you to church camp. Of course, maybe you're shaking while you do it.
Yes. So one of the things that I'm grateful for is the evangelistic spirit that we have here at Dowling Road. Early on in our marriage, Petula and I got involved in a marriage couples class, and it was informal, Bible studies at someone's home. I think it was an elder at the time, and one of the things that I really enjoyed about those meetings is that it's really after the Bible study, you see the couples sometimes that are really struggling. They hang around and they really discuss the issues. And through the years, we've been in various marriage couples classes. Now we have one that we started. I think it was like several months ago for new married couples, and so we stopped over the summer, but we're gonna start back up again. Because that helps a lot of struggling married couples. If you have that kind of support system.
And so again, there's multiple comfort zones, right? You got so we've got to bring people into a home.
Yes.
So that means, right?
Yes.
That's preparing to have people over. That's uncomfortable. There's
for
a lot.
for some people it is.
Yeah, and you got the before prep and the after cleanup and all of that, and just and then there's just again the uncomfortable of we're probably going to have to address some things in our marriage that it might hit close to home. And do we really want to go there? Well, do we want our marriage to grow?
Yeah, and so
I'm glad you guys are doing that. That's awesome.
It's like when we talk about that, marriage, and one of the books that we were reading about how marriage is, the purpose of marriage is to make you holy, not happy. And when you marry someone, it's like holding up a mirror to yourself.
Yeah,
it exposes your sin. Yeah, and so being involved in a couples meeting, that is. Somewhat stepping outside of your comfort zone to be able to share those issues that you could be having,
Oh yeah, I mean that's. But again, like your prayer life.
Yes.
Right. Or just sometimes it may be fear. I know that. It's funny. I didn't think of this way as Paul. I say this a lot, but now I just see Paul more and more this way. He says, "I was with you in weakness and fear and in much trembling." There was whatever was going on in Paul. He had a lot of fear to overcome, and when we start learning more about people's anxieties and fears, and it can be a pretty big monster to fight sometimes. And so I know for me, sometimes that maybe I'm the bubbly people person, but there's times that I am like really afraid inside, and you just have to push through some things. Like, okay, I got to get through this anxiety. God will help me, or maybe my brother, or sister, or someone else will help me through it. But we have to push through that and get uncomfortable because it's worth it. Get on the other side. I like what you said. It grows. Our comfort zone will grow. Right.
And so another thing you mentioned is about evangelism and how that could be one of our giants that we have to overcome. So I remember how I was introduced into the gospel. And I was raised in the church, but I wasn't baptized for scriptural reason initially until I met Sister Linda Mercier. I was working at the local hospital here. It was called MASH at the time, and she would always invite me over to her house for a Bible study, and I finally decided to take her up on that offer, and so because we were working at the hospital together, right? And so I was working in the lab. And so that's how I was, became a Christian through her. But shortly after I became a Christian, there was one of her coworkers there. Her name was, I don't say her name, but anyway, we had a coworker there, and I was on fire and everything, inviting people. So I had one of those cards, and I wanted to invite her to services, and so I took a card out of my shirt and I gave her, talked to her, and she said, "Don't take this personally," and she took the card and she tore it up and put it back in my shirt, the shirt pocket, and I don't know how many people would have taken that, but for me, my heart was racing.
Exactly.
What's you gonna do? I've been rejected. I've been rejected.
Yeah.
And that's people don't like rejection. That's
No.
one of the comfort zones is rejection. Everybody wants to be accepted in some way, and she was a good friend. We talked a lot, but and so that left an indelible impression on me about how some people react when you do something simple, as just giving them a card to invite them to services.
Yeah. And I'm with you. It's just amazing how I can go through a room of 300 people, but then there's time I'll still tremble a little bit when I pull that out and like talk to the lady at the cashier. It's like, hey, I'd like to have you come to, and someone may not think that of me, but it is. I have to push through that fear too. It may not be as much fear as someone else, but I'm like, okay, come on, Aaron, come on.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm so thankful for is you're doing the Bible studies on the campus of Lamar University.
Yeah.
Because I went to Lamar for my bachelor's and my master's degree. And I can, a lot of times, when we have youth and they go off to college, that's when they lose their faith.
Oh, yeah.
They're challenged on the campus, intellectually by those professors who think they know it all. And there have been some times, when as I was growing, when I was an undergraduate, for me, being a member of Dowling Road at that time in my life, it really strengthened my faith because everything that I saw was really strengthened. I saw, about the ancient, architectural things about, they all pointed, to God, to me. But there were times when, given the opportunity to talk about, things religious, I took the opportunity to do so. I was in an English class once. I was taking British literature. And my professor's name was Dr. Priest. That was his name, was Dr. Priest. So he made a comment that that the Bible is a book of fairy tales, and the book of Genesis is it's just a myth. And so I said, Dr. Priest, if we're being lied to in Genesis, then we're being lied to in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Amen.
And we can't rely on the Bible for anything. So.
Amen.
And so when you say stuff like that and you stand out, sometimes people may be thinking the same thing, but they don't come forward.
That's it.
But they appreciate you.
Yeah, they're glad you said it.
Right. So they come, man, I'm glad you said something. I think the same thing.
Exactly. I mean, that's the truth.
But the thing is, so after class, and I walked by Dr. Priest, and he said, listen, I would choose to view the Bible the way I please. But that didn't bother me. Okay. And I said, okay. He's a professor.
Right.
The only class I got a B in. All the class I got an A in, and every other class, in literature I got an A. But that one, I was deservedly slow because that was it flooded some during that time. And I wasn't able to come to class, to make up a test to for count for. But yeah. So those kind of things and opportunities where we come when we have those challenges, we need to challenge the authority of the professors in a respectful way. Wife always said, if you fail in the class, don't say anything else sideways because you're not.
Yeah.
But you have an opportunity to to insert God into the conversation. Take every opportunity you have. And that may lead to someone coming to you afterwards, and that may be open the door for you to study with people.
Yeah, or you're like you said, someone else may not have said something this time, but now because you said it, they say it the next time. You've emboldened them. But there's something else about you're making me think about the idea of the comfort zone because there's a couple ways I was thinking about it, Harold. One is when I went to college, obviously the same. I went to Purdue, and they're all different ideas, and I was challenged to question everything I believed. Talk about getting out of your comfort zone. Well, I grew, but I had to be uncomfortable because I had to ask hard questions. Do I really trust the pages of this Bible? Is there really a God? Okay, did he come in the face of Jesus Christ and die on the cross and raise from the dead? Is baptism really necessary? Things like that. And I was challenged to but then there's another aspect of that, like you said. I'm thinking about the professor. He's challenged to get out of his comfort zone in a sense. And sometimes when I've teach something and someone challenges me, right? Then that means I have to get out of my comfort zone and say, okay, did I teach what was right? And I'm willing to go through that process. If I'm not willing to go out of that process, and again, we're staying in our little safe comfort zones, which is where the Pharisees stayed. They were never challenged. They would not be challenged. And so as in a position of authority or teaching, whatever else, a parent, I may have to be challenged, Maybe Anna has to challenge me as a spouse and say, the way you're thinking or saying or doing, right? So I have to be willing to be challenged. And so there's so many ways I'm thinking about this as you're talking. This is really good.
Yeah,
this is really good.
And for college students, then I want to encourage you, step outside of your comfort zone and challenge those things that are not right. And if you have the opportunity, given the freedom, the latitude, to present things to your class, use the Bible in your presentation. When I took speech, I did a speech on the essentiality of baptism. You can go in college, and then I minored in Spanish. And I minored in Spanish. My bachelor's degree was in psychology. I minored in Spanish. So, given the opportunity to present, what I did was I presented God's plan of salvation in Spanish. Yeah.
Wow. Muy bueno.
Yeah. So I remember talking to
Awesome.
Wesley about it, and he said, "You better take a mattress with you." So after I presented it, I got some interesting reactions. Okay, so the teacher, she said, "Okay, so what if the toe is left out of the water? Is the toe going to hell?"
Those questions,
right.
Yeah.
But then the classmates, they had a more interesting response.
Yeah.
The classmates, they said, "Is that really in the Bible? I'm gonna go get one and see," because they couldn't believe it.
Right.
They couldn't believe how straightforward the Bible is on essentiality of salvation.
Yeah.
That they would go and read it.
Yeah. Which is interesting because that's kind of the New Testament results, right? You have Paul's mocked, and others like, "Hey, I want to look into this more."
Right. Yes.
It's interesting. It's the same responses. It doesn't change. Yeah.
So there's another example too. Now we going back and forth, New Testament, Old Testament, but that's the way that I have them down. Now there is then the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? In Luke chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. Okay. Verse 25 reads, "And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, 'Teacher, what will I do to inherit eternal life?' And he said to him, 'What is written in the law? What is your reading?' So he answered and said, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself.' And he said to him," is this the right set?
Yes.
Okay. He answered rightly and said, 'Do this and you will live.' But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' Then Jesus answered and said, 'A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you.' So which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him, who fell upon these?" And he said, "He who showed mercy on him." Then Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." So there we see an example of where we see that we know how the Samaritans were viewed, so you can see that has racial implications as well. Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritan, a story that challenges us to step out of our comfort zones and show compassion to others, even those who might be considered outsiders or enemies. So the Samaritan goes out of his way to help a stranger in need, demonstrating love and kindness that transcends social and cultural boundaries.
Yeah. So there's no third list, as I've said before, but God says love the Lord and love your neighbor. So there's no list 3. Anyone who's not God is your neighbor. But to do that, Harold, is uncomfortable. To love your neighbor, as this is teaching, by definition means we have to get out of our comfort zone.
Yes.
Because, and I think about, what I just wrote as you were reading in verse 29 right above it. I wrote, but he desiring, instead of justify himself, I wrote right above it, desiring to stay comfortable.
Yes.
Right? He's very happy in his own religious situation. I've kept these. This is what the law says. I'm keeping it. But I think that comes back to he had a story. He had a wrong narrative on who his neighbor was. And the story he told himself was to keep him within his circle of people he wanted to be with.
Yeah, and we're warned about that in James, I believe. When someone is showing partiality to someone who may not be dressed as well as another person.
Yeah.
Here at the Down Road Church, we're very racially integrated, and I can remember. It was a long time ago, several years ago. There was a preacher who came, and he may have been African American. He was from the pulpit, and he say, "Well, y'all got some on this side and some on that side, and y'all got a problem." So we feel
get out of the comfort zone.
We feel comfortable sitting, by people who are sometimes have most of the things in common with us. And the most apparent things may be, could be race. Sometimes, my kids might say, okay, well, when they go to Bible class, depending on how they are, people may be sitting, again, with one group, another, but they don't conscientiously set out to do that. That just things that happen naturally, and I think that happens a lot sometimes, that's just, natural for people to do that.
Yeah.
But when we step outside of our comfort zone, we say, okay, well, I'm gonna, go over, and bridge the gap.
Yeah, find someone, like you'll see group, but maybe someone over here is an outlier and they don't really fit into a group, and you get out of your comfort zone and bring them in. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I like about the group program. If you participate in the group program, that's an area for you to come outside of your comfort zone and get to know more people on a one-on-one basis. So it's like maybe a structure to something that that's already organized for you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I remember one of the things as a bachelor coming into this congregation. They had the group program as there, and when I became Christian, I was on fire. I want to do everything I get, So I got in different groups, and that was one of the things, that I really enjoyed, because we went to people's home. It may have been, sometimes we went for a study, sometimes we went for a study and a meal, sometimes we just went for a meal, but we hung out together, and that's important too. Hanging out outside of. Well, I say hanging out. I mean, obviously, I mean spend time together outside of the worship services. That's how you really get to form relationships with your brothers and sisters in Christ, and so that being involved, stepping out of your comfort zone sometimes, but.
Yeah, and there's so many different directions, right? So it could be a racial thing. It could be age. Sometimes it's the younger families and then the older families, and we need to integrate that as well. Right, because, I mean, thinking about out of that comfort zone, maybe you start to talk to somebody who is 80. They've been married 60 years.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I know that I think didn't you have Jerry and Ethel?
We did.
Right?
We did. Oh man, that was awesome.
I heard about that, and I wish I could have been there.
Yeah, they had a lot of great stories. I even made some pancakes.
I've heard legendary stories about the pancakes. So your son Jackson's talked about that. But no, so that again, maybe that's where I would encourage young people, but also older people. Maybe the older ones as well need to get out of the comfort zone and go initiate that conversation with the young. I saw Gerald and Maya over the other night. They were sitting with the Beards, and so you just see that this age and integration and all that, just everybody's together. And that's, one of the things that I heard a preacher say Harold, a long time ago, and I've tried to use this a lot, is that we have the most important thing in common.
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
We have the most important thing in common. And then if I can get that in mind, and then I realize, wow, they may be 40 years older than me, but man, I learned so much from them, or they had just some really cool things about their life that I learned that I didn't know. And then you built a friendship that you weren't expecting.
Right. Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have these little things in my mind, like we are people, united together by the blood of Christ.
Amen.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Amen. There's one blood type.
Yes. So,
Amen.
Yeah. So, and what we see in this example of the Good Samaritan is people, and sometimes stepping out of our comfort zones means serving others in unexpected ways. Mm-hmm. It's about moving beyond our preferences and prejudices to actively care for those around us. And so then it's like a thought question. We need to consider ways we can extend compassion in the service of the Lord's church. All right. So how can we step out of our comfort zone to make a difference in someone's life?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, is there, you think about, okay, you got I know, just thinking of an example, you got a young mom, she's got a couple kids, she's pregnant, and here is maybe somebody who says, okay, we're going to sit with you during services, or we're going to take your kids for a day so you can get a break, right?
Yes.
Now that there is maybe it was uncomfortable for that person to call and, like, am I overstepping my bounds, right? Something like that, but they're doing that. Something like that, maybe, flipping it around. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, Harold, for me to ask for help.
Yes, I was thinking the exact same thing. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To ask it and receive it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone says, well, hey, Aaron, you need help? No, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you ain't got it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? So the comfort zone for me, it may just be to ask, hey, I really need some help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways. Yeah. And I think just thinking about, someone puts a meal train on Facebook, for us, so we can care for one of our brothers and sisters. Well, that might be uncomfortable for you, but that might be a great way to, if you can make meals and, do that for them.
Yeah. So I remember, a few times when we had to evacuate due to hurricanes, years ago. And, so one time we went to a congregation. It was the Irving congregation. And we were staying in the hotel. I didn't know how long we'd have to be, stay in the hotel. But we went to go worship with the brethren there. And of course, I didn't want to ask me, we do this, but we didn't know our situation. And they ended up giving us a house. They had a house where they used for gatherings. They gave us a house, and they brought mattresses over. They brought food over, and we were even going to enroll the kids in school because that's how long Beaumont was closed.
Wow.
And so.
Man.
But that same day that Tula went to the school to talk to them about enrolling our kids, they had opened Beaumont up again, and so we thanked the brother and then came on back to Beaumont. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And just someone, how did that impact you? I just think about Jesus. He's like that's how the world will know we're his disciples.
Right. And so, and this thing, we didn't ask for anything, we just told them our situation, and they offered, we just accepted,
Yeah.
So that's wonderful.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So another example is, look at time, we got 12 minutes. Okay. So it's the power of God's presence. And we talk about Joshua in the Promised Land. So in Joshua, you mentioned Joshua 24:19, but let's see, Joshua. Joshua 1:9. Okay, so it reads, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Mm-hmm. And that offers a powerful promise. during our times when we might feel like challenged to step outside of our comfort zone. As Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land, he faced immense challenges and uncertainties. Yet he was reassured of God's constant presence and support. And it's so stepping outside of our comfort zone is less daunting when we remember that God is with us every step of the way, and His presence provides strength and courage. And so as you venture into new and uncertain areas, cling to the assurance that God's presence is your constant companion.
Yeah. I was thinking about, Joshua, he was asked to do some hard stuff. Going into the promised land, driving out the Canaanites, taking this new nation in and helping them get all settled in the land. I mean, the things he was asked to do with killing the Canaanites, I mean, that was a very difficult thing that he was asked to do. And how many times in that chapter alone, he tells them to be strong and of good courage. But I love what you're saying here about the power of God's presence. As a parent, you can understand this. There's something about the calming influence of the child may be afraid, but now they can hold daddy's hand. It's okay. Right?
Yes.
And so while we may be afraid, to know here that God's presence is with us, I will be with you. It's interesting how many times God promises His leaders, I will be with you.
Yes. There are numerous other examples that we can mention about this, but I think those are good for us to meditate
absolutely.
on. Got any closing remarks?
Yeah. So I appreciate this so much. So and again, if you have any comments just put them on the Facebook section, and we'll answer those. Or any questions, we'll get to that. If you're looking to study more about Jesus, again, make sure that you put that in there as well. If you're here in the local Beaumont area, we'd be happy to meet with you and study with you. If you're in another area, we can study with you, or we can have someone local wherever you are in the world could study with you. But again, as we think about this idea of stepping out of our comfort zone, I like what you say here. It's embracing God's call to grow, serve, and trust. God calls us, and it's interesting, like with Moses, He called him and He equipped him, right? He called David and He equipped him. And so if God calls us to do something, and we see, we've got talent. What I mean by that is we have talents and abilities that we discover that we have. Well, God will He'll give us the power, He'll equip us, He'll be with us. And I want to say one more thing about that, with this idea of God promises to be with you. I was reading Exodus 3 and 4 the other day, and Moses tried to give as you know the text, he tried to give every excuse in the world not to.
Right. It's another example, of stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Was not eloquent in speech.
Yeah. And so he had every excuse in the world, but God said, one of the things He says, I will be with you. And that might just seem overly simplistic, but I do believe probably more often than not, we need to remind ourselves that God is with us.
It's a powerful word of affirmation.
Yeah, and we need that.
Yes.
We need that. And so understand, when you step out of that comfort zone, God is there. When you're doing what God asked you to do, whether you're having an uncomfortable conversation, whether you're trying to grow in your marriage, your prayer life, whether you're stepping out in some new ministry that you want to do, maybe it's moving to a different job or trying something new in life, God is there with you in that challenge. And so as I think about, for some reason I was thinking about Psalm 23, as we were going through our own valleys of the shadow of death in our life, Ann and I, my mentor, Roger Schaus, he said, God he's taking you through the valley, Aaron. You don't stay there, but He's with you in the valley, and He's going to be with you on the high ground. You just let Him walk with you. And
powerful points to remember. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Harold, so much, and look forward to doing more of these together. I know you had some other ideas, so I'm looking forward to that down the road whenever you're ready.
Yeah. It's been great for me to be here. I'm very thankful for that opportunity. It must have been when you first asked me several months ago. And I said but I said, okay, let's do this.
Yeah. Yep.
Step outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, that was the first title you came. Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right, and we all need that. And so thank you for joining us again. If you have any comments, put those in the Facebook comments there, and we'll get back to those as soon as we can. And once you lead us, sorry.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
We'll lead us in. We're going.
Yes.
Okay. God and Father in heaven, we we thank you for your examples of faith and courage in your word. Help us to step out of our comfort zones with confidence, knowing that you are with us. Guide us as we face new challenges and opportunities, and fill us with your strength and love. May our lives reflect your grace